Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Soulpepper Training Room. My name is Gregory Prest, and I will be helping to facilitate this afternoon's conversation with Weyni Mengesha. I am in my home in Toronto, which is also where Soulpepper Theatre Company stands. This land is the traditional land of the Haudenosaunee, the Huron-Wendat, and the Mississaugas of the Credit. It is land which Indigenous people have long, ongoing, and deep relationships. I want to acknowledge that they are the original storytellers of this land, and to reaffirm Soulpepper's commitment to celebrating Indigenous voices, Indigenous artists, and their stories. We started the training room in the fall of 2019 as a way to help provide accessible artist training, a series of master classes and workshops and conversations, a place for people to come and learn and train and practice and meet people, build community, to ask questions, and to chew away at this thing that we do. So thank you, those of you who are joining us today. I got very nervous because I'm speaking with one of the greatest people there is in the city. Okay, no more nervousness, just celebration. She would want this to be love. So some of you had submitted questions when you registered, so thank you for doing that. We'll get to some of those during our conversation. If you have questions during our conversation that you'd like to ask Weyni, there are a couple ways you can do that. You can email us at questions@soulpepper.ca, or you can use Twitter using the hashtag SBTrainingRoom. There's also, you might notice, a little chat function underneath here. So please use that, engage in the conversation. You can ask questions that way, but we do ask that you please respect that space as a safe space. So now it is my great privilege to introduce Weyni. Weyni is the artistic director of Soulpepper Theatre Company and an award-winning director. She is known for her groundbreaking work and for her community engagement. Her work has been seen all across the city, the country, in London and in New York, in Los Angeles. She's garnered many awards, including the NAACP nomination for Best Direction, as well as multiple Dora nominations and awards for Outstanding Direction. She directed two of the most popular English-speaking shows to come out of Canada in the past 2 decades, "To Kink in My Hair" and "Kim's Convenience." You might have heard of them. Both have gone on to break box office records, tour nationally and internationally, and both have been developed into television shows playing on CBC Global and Netflix. She's been an instructor with the National Theatre School of Canada and was co-artistic director with Claire Calnan, the Amy Project, for 7 years, and founded Sound the Horn, a youth training program and annual festival that she ran for 5 years, nurturing a generation of Ethiopian and Eritrean young artists across the diaspora. In 2017, Weyni was named one of the Women in View's 5 in Focus, identifying 5 rising film directors across Canada. And she's recently named one of the 50 most influential people in Toronto by Toronto Life magazine. I've had the great privilege of being directed by her 3 times. She is a visionary, an outstanding leader, an incredible champion of others, the best director you'd ever want to work with, and a great friend. So after that long introduction, it's not long enough. You're amazing. Here is Weyni Mengesha.
Thank you. Hey, Gregory.
I got so nervous introducing you.
What? Come on. Thanks for doing this with me.
Well, thanks for coming. I know you've had such a busy week.
Yeah, it has been busy. It's been a good week. It's been a great week.
What did you do?
Yeah, lots of things. And the highlight definitely was that we got to participate in this special that's being created by Emancipation Arts and CBC to celebrate Emancipation Day, August 1st. So I got to, I called up AC Mensa and Travis Knights, and we developed a piece celebrating the drum and African dance from diaspora. So look out for that, August 1st.
Fantastic. Great. Well, I have lots of questions for you, many from our viewers, and I have some questions myself. But I thought we would start in a different way. In our conversations leading up to this talk, I was curious if you would be willing to share some of the seminal moments for you over the course of the journey of your life as an artist and as a leader and as a director. And I'm so curious how it started for you.
Yeah. So I had to, I think there's many different sort of, I could go far back to my childhood, but I would say the most important pivotal moment of my youth was in high school. I was heading sort of towards an ambition to do law as a good young Ethiopian child of immigrants, and then I decided to figure out how to tell stories. So I had a teacher who was really influential, a drama teacher, but I was never really involved in theater. I had never even gone down and seen a play. My parents were into literature, but not really theater. But there was a need for me to inspire, encourage my community, hear their voices, for myself too, what I wasn't seeing in school. And so there was a group at my high school in Scarborough called Black to the Future. And it was run by Dwayne Morgan, who was a poet. He's now, he actually just ran for NDP in Scarborough last year, and he's still doing his work. And when he graduated, I became the president of Black to the Future. And we just needed a way to tell stories and to empower the youth in our group. And so we used theater. So I didn't know much about what I was doing. I was sort of learning while I was doing it. And then I decided to apply to university. As my teacher was saying, I think this is the way you can make an impact. So that was sort of the first thing where theater became something that I was even aware of. And then going to university, I went to York, looking as an actor and looking for an African Canadian monologue to audition with was so difficult. I didn't know where to find it. And I went in, and not long in the middle of my first year, I was feeling like I wanted to go back to what really engaged me in theater, which was telling my own story. And so I went out and pulled some of the folks that I met in my first year, and I did a show at York Woods Library Theater with, again, Dwayne Morgan, who had now gone on. And so he produced the show I did. And it was amazing. We had like sold out 3 shows, and there was this thing I was doing, of course, in theater school, you're not supposed to be doing too much. I was doing it sort of after hours and everything. Anyways, it was really empowering. And it was something I kind of got the bug, and I went back to school, and that was the thing about that was so important, even more than the show and anything else, was meeting Audrey Zena Mendiela, who was the then artistic director of Be Current, and Janet Sears. And they opened up my whole world to what was happening in Canada. And that year was the first African Canadian Playwrights Festival. And I was invited to go to that. And I met Janet Sears there, who was the artistic director of that festival. And at that festival, I'll never forget, I was in the crowd. There was Black artistic directors from London, from the States. She'd gathered 50 artistic directors or playwrights across the country. And at the opening ceremony, she read a poem by Langston Hughes. And it just affected my trajectory hugely. So here's the poem. I can't read it on there, so I'll read it on my phone. I guess I can go to share screen here. Zoom, speaker view. No, I can't. Here it is. You've taken my blues and gone. You sing them on Broadway, and you sing them in the Hollywood Bowl, and you mixed them up with symphonies, and you fixed them so they don't sound like me. Yep, you done taken my blues and gone. You also took my spirituals and gone. You put me in Macbeth and Carmen Jones and all kinds of swing Mikados and everything. But what about me? Stand up. But someday, somebody will stand up and talk about me and write about me, Black and beautiful, and sing about me and put on plays about me. I reckon it'll be me, myself. Yes. It will be me. And this was written in 1940 by Langston Hughes. Janet read that out loud to the whole group of us. And, I was one of two people in my program at York University at the time of color. And it made me feel a responsibility to change that experience that I had going into university and not being able to find a monologue. I wanted to do something different. I wanted to be more actively involved. So I switched to the directing program. Second pivotal moment. And I also became obsessed with Audrey Zena Mengesha and Janet Sears and like followed them around. So in the directing program, I was again trying to find my voice as a director and still coming up against the obstacle of not having a lot of resources in that program. Luckily, the chair of the faculty at that time, Peter McKinnon, was incredible. And I approached him and I said, I would like to do my own independent study about the aesthetics of African Canadian theater. And, I said, I'm having a hard time trying to find those kind of resources here. And he said, absolutely. And he supported my fourth year independent study. So of course I chased Janet Sears right away. And I said, I want to work with you and I want to go across the country and I want to document the practices. And so that was where I got my first professional gig, and it was assistant directing with Janet Sears. Here's a picture of me and Janet. I was probably 21 and we did the show and it was huge. It was Obsidian's, an ambitious show by Obsidian and Nightwood co-produced. It had 20 odd Black artists and Indigenous artists working together. Here's a shot of the photo. Here's a photo of the show. And my job was to work with the African chorus and to talk about the aesthetics of the African chorus. And and that it just sort of, my first professional gig was so ambitious and so creatively magical. And, it wasn't a one woman show, and Janet, that's just kind of how she rolls. She was like, we're going to make incredible space and why can't we do it all? And so I would say that the spirit of that first experience kind of always made me ask questions and sort of not ever be satisfied with, I think sort of what I was seeing, which was sort of a one narrative in Canada, something like Nina sort of talked about it at the last show, the last training room the other day. Right. And so, I think I was infected with that sort of, we can do anything and let's get it done. And I went on after that to start seeking out different collaborators. So the first person I met was Trey Anthony. And Trey Anthony, of course, the writer of The Kink in My Hair. And she said to me, I have this like monologue, 6 monologues that I want to perform a one woman show. Of course, it changed and evolved. And over the years, we did it at the Fringe, and it became a 7-person cast, and then it became a 10-person cast. We did it at New York Fringe. We did it at the Halifax Fringe. We did a show at the Harbor Front, but we couldn't get it in the regional theaters until Lane Coleman at Pass Marais. Lane Coleman believed in the project, and he gave us our first production. And from there we kind of we did the production again. It did really well. It sold out, and we again with that spirit of we should be in the largest theaters. Why not? So we called up the Mervishes and we were like, we want you to come see the show. We want you to come see the show. And they kept calling us, and they missed it at Harbor Front, and then they missed it at Pass Marais. And so Trey and I said, well, that's okay. We'll bring the show to you. So we actually went and did the show on the 5th floor of their offices. And we were just like, we just want this to happen. And it happened in 2005. There's a picture of us here rehearsing. Oh, there's opening night. That's us at the Mervishes, at the Princess of Wales opening night. And it was the first Canadian show to be done at the Princess of Wales, let alone 17 Black women in the cast and in the band. You'll see Julie Black there at the back, Debbie Young, Raymond Dowda, Ordina Stevens, Lisa Codrington, Ngozi Paul. who all became, we all sort of, after that, we collaborated with each other and made so many other pieces of work together. So that was, of course, an incredible time. And then from then on, the kink sort of took its own journey and started developing itself into television. Meanwhile, Lane and I at Pass Marai developed a relationship, and I stayed at Pass Marai as associate artistic director and working with heading the new play development program. And that's where I met you, Gregory.
Yeah, that's where we met. It was called Stage 3. It was a festival of new work.
Yeah, that was my first festival I ever produced. And it had Anita Majumdar's show and Joseph Jomo Pierre, Born Ready, Blood Clot, show that I worked with Debbie on. And it was incredible. Yeah, and so that was my first taste of artistic direction and programming. And again, Lane was really supportive, and then Debbie became sort of someone that I kept collaborating with, and Ngozi Paul actually is the one who's producing Emancipation Arts, the special we just did this week. So from there, we had done Blood Clot. We did it all over. We traveled to London and New York, and Debbie actually said to me, you know, there's Soulpepper is creating an academy, and why don't we've done so many things, why don't we go back to training? It's actually a paid training program where we can continue to develop our art, and so that's the next thing. Debbie and I both became 2 out of the 10 artists that were pulled from across Canada to be in the first Soulpepper Academy. Here's an image of us here. You'll see a young Mike Ross there, and Michael Blake, who's of course an ensemble member at Stratford, and Lorenzo, who's a resident designer at Soulpepper now, Jennifer, who does our youth programming, Nick Leon, who I've collaborated with on Butcher and other shows. So the Soulpepper Academy was 2 years of just being able to go further into the work. And then after that, I was a kind of a hard period after that, because like Trey Anthony couldn't get her second play produced. I was just starting to get frustrated by how we could break walls down, how we could get far, and still it was still so hard to have people and artistic directors see the value of developing new work. Of course, in the Soulpepper Academy, the second year, I actually met Ince Choi, and that's where he developed King's. That's where he showed me Kim's Convenience. That's where I read that, and I got to direct that play at Soulpepper, which was incredible. Into somebody he was the only person when I was at York in first year. He was older than me, and he was somebody that I looked up to because he was such a powerful performer. He's an incredible artist, and I just started to think people are not moving fast enough who are excellent, and I just was on too many panels about diversity and inclusion, and I wasn't seeing enough action, and I just started to see things happening faster in the States. So that's when I left, and here I am 9 years later. I've returned. That's the story in a nutshell.
Well, it's incredible. And what is it that brought you back here? We're so happy to have you. Thank you for coming back. So what is it that brought you back here? Why did you want to come back?
Nina said something interesting in her talk on Wednesday, where she was saying that crisis in a different language means dangerous opportunity. Yes, it was a crisis I was coming back to in Soulpepper. I understood that. But I know that for us to continue to work in the way that I really want to do work, where we're talking about really hearing stories and really representing our city, something had to be cracked open first. We couldn't just be moving forward. So to be honest, there were real conversations happening in Toronto, because of what was going on. We weren't even at the point of BLM and all of that, but we were at the point of really talking about practices and rehearsal rooms and what's okay. And and how making great art starts with great cultural practice and how we treat each other. And I think that's integral for us to really have sort of, my fantasy of the cultural institution is that everybody feels ownership in it. And you can meet all kinds of artists there. And it's a freedom that, but that has to be that we all understand that they're safe spaces. So that to me is a basic thing that I felt like we weren't having those conversations before. So that to me felt like an invitation to have further conversations. And that's what we've been doing over the year and a half. And so that's why, yeah.
You mentioned earlier that you felt that things weren't moving fast enough. And do you have any thoughts as to what was holding it back?
Yeah, I just think it has to do with risk, there's part of it is just like scarcity, like with, the mentality, because we don't have the same funding systems as Europe, for example. You have to rely on private donations. There's a lot. So risk is a hard thing to take in our industry in Toronto and Canada, just because of the way that the systems of art are how it's created. But with great risk, also comes great rewards. And I think at some point people would talk about inclusion and new voices and diversity as a risk more than an opportunity. And I got tired of that conversation. I got tired of like the panel or the course that someone was going to take about inclusion. I wanted artists to just be able to have agency to create work. And when that does happen, we see, it's not like, for example, with Kim's, and it's not, nobody was doing Ince any favors. He did a huge favor for the country,
Yeah.
And I'm just like tired of having to discuss systemic racism or what richness and diversity brings to a cultural sector. So I think I didn't want to be around to talk about what the problem was. I wanted to be around to talk about the solutions.
Great. I have some questions here. Shall we go into these questions?
Sure.
Sure. So these were submitted from people who are watching. So we'll get to some of them. Here we go. This one is from Alexandra Lenfiesta. And she says, hi, Weyni. In your opinion, do we have to go to a professional training program to learn and build our craft as a director? Or is it better to learn by apprenticing other directors and trying to work in the industry?
Oh, that's a great question. I wish I knew like the path to take. I did a bit of both, I also did sort of the traditional school route, but as you heard in my story, I didn't do it traditionally, and I think these programs are there to teach you, but also they're there to learn from you. So if you're seeing voids or places where there are gaps, there's a provocation for you to fill it. And I mean, that's what I did anyways. And I'll have to say that my mom is a bit of a badass. And when I came home kind of sulking about my program, she's like, what are you going to do about it? And I was like, oh, right. I guess that, and so there's that, I think we don't have to settle if something is not serving you and you think that, that there's not enough representation in an institution, like we can voice that, because that independent study that I did, that paper was then there for the next generation. And that precedent also to be able to say, hey, this is not in your syllabus anywhere. I want to learn this. If you're not teaching it to me, I'm paying. And I feel like there should be a diversity. I've done 3 years of everything else you've taught me. I would like some options. And I feel like you have to cut your own path. Every artist does. And it has to be tailored to what you need and your unique voice.
Here's a question from Joanne Williams. What are your tips for directors and theater makers cultivating partnerships that last?
Joy. it's so easy to get in in the middle of a rehearsal process and to start to feel the anxiety of an audience coming. You know, we're not film, or we can't cut and retake. And that can cause stress, and people, you know, don't ever forget the relationships are key in your process. The respect for each other, that is don't ever, you know, that should be top priority to me. You know, it's joy in that rehearsal room. We are creating, we are playing. Sometimes we can lose that, you know, because of the pressures around the economy, all of it, you know. I think, you know, yeah, if the show doesn't go well, there could be more regret about how you didn't treat someone well in that process than shows. The product of a show, it's subjective, you know. The relationships are key. And yeah, so I think, yeah, and that builds the trust, and trust ultimately makes for a more enjoyable ride, you know, with somebody. And that's, to me, like my longtime collaborators. We try to remember that. Remember Streetcar, when we were just like in tech, there was all kinds of singing, and it's important, you know, it's important to remember that we're playing, and that we're giving each other room to be ourselves, to bring ourselves, to not work under the stress, even if our, you know, the way that our it shapes out with short rehearsals and everything else, even though there are pressures around it, we don't have to fall into that trap.
And that's something you're so incredible at. That's something I respect so much about you, and you know, that you have so much patience all through the process, that there isn't that thing that happens at the very end, that hurry up, we need to, you know, and all the work kind of falls apart because of the anxiety to like get it done. And that's kind of, you know, I love seeing that. It's so incredible. You're amazing.
Oh, well, you know, you just never know when invention's going to happen. And, you know, like you could solve a play in the final hour, but you have to be turned on. Your intuition has to be turned on. And that's a very raw, you know, it's like the animal that comes out of the cave. You scare it, it goes back in. It's hard to get it out again. That's intuition. That's creativity. Those are your raw materials. I feel like it's my job to keep that space available so everybody's animals can be out of that cave all the time, and they can have a little dance. They don't feel like they have to protect themselves. So you shut a person down, or you shut that room down, and you might miss out on the opportunities of invention, you know.
Here is a question from Karen Roberts, who asks, what do you do every day to be creative outside of your job duties for yourself?
I try to meditate. I'm not that good at it, but I try, because it does, when I can make the time for it, I have a much better day. And I'm more open and porous, just like creatively. Also, I have 2 children, 5 and 7, 2 boys, and I have to make 5 minutes count that are my own. Because if I don't wake up with them on my face, they will soon be running up the stairs, and that will be the end of it. I'll fall asleep putting them to bed, and then I'll, you know, so it's kind of, my life is kind of 24 hours with other people. So I really find that you can turn a few minutes into important moments with meditation, personally.
It's a question from Chantel Han. Chantel asks, what is the best way for an actor transitioning to directing to cultivate a vocabulary when collaborating with designers? How essential is that shared lexicon?
Yeah, I think I can, you know, I have a few designers that I work with a lot, and they're not unlike actors. They have different ways of entering work. So I wouldn't say there's a one size fits all. Some of my designers that I work with a lot love images, and like, you know, and that's kind of our language. And some like, so you kind of have to know. I also feel the same way, like with actors. Sometimes I feel like some actors play jazz, and some actors are methodical about the way they approach the work. And like my children are different the way they learn, and I'm not comparing actors to children. I'm just saying, I'm different too. Like I have a way of learning that I know, and I think it's about really taking the time it's relationships. How does that person respond? How is that person responding? Checking in with them. But yeah, I like to provide things both in text and in images. I like to talk about the overall concept of the show, and how that pertains to the world that those characters are living in, what character light plays, what character their environment plays on the conditions of their life. And sometimes I will show that in images, and sometimes I'll just talk about that, and the designer will show me images, so usually we share a Pinterest page, and those images become really important to reference through the process. Yeah.
John in the chat asks if you can speak a bit more about the balance between preparation and intuition.
For me?
Yes.
Yeah. I do a lot of prep work and then I throw it away. So especially for writers, if it's a new writer or a writer that's not alive, I try to read everything they write. I like to understand them. My connection is relationships. I want to feel like I know this writer. I know how they would tell me a joke. I know a sense of humor, because I want to honor that. To me, it's music. It's like learning a chart of music. It's rhythm. How do they write? How do they think? Because then I feel like we can best collaborate, and we have a sort of. So yeah, I like to write. If there's a bio, I'll drink that up about that writer. Because I want to know what they're looking for. I want to know what they want to talk about, and not because I don't have my own thing I bring to it. I do, but I want to be working with the river, not against it, So they wrote the words, so they know what they're talking, like it's no point in trying to create another story on top of a story. So I come in really prepared with the historical time, that person's life potentially, and how it might have affected what they're writing. And then I come into the room, and I don't hold on to it tightly, because I then have to give room for the other collaborators. I've already collaborated at that point with the designers. I shared with all of them all my research, but I don't put too much of it onto the actors. I only sort of translate it into sort of smaller, larger conceptual ideas, because I feel like it can get too heavy. Like, I don't want people acting in molasses with like too many things at a time. They have to just be, I feel like they need to be free to have impulses and to make those connections.
Yeah.
So I often make a wall where like I'll leave some resources or talk about some things, or maybe point to some things. Like I think Gregory, like just trying to think of shows we've done to like with Streetcar, I definitely reference some of the bio stuff from Tennessee.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
And just to make that available, because it's just a personal way to get in. And definitely we talked about historical, even though we were setting it, in a different time, we definitely talked about what the context, so that we can understand how to contemporize, like what are the stakes in our current society. So yeah, I don't know, knowledge is power. The more you know, the better. G.I. Joe, all that. I just think it's just not something that I put on the actors too much.
Alex in the chat asks, what happened for 9 years in the States? He was unsatisfied with our
that wasn't enough. So I have to say it was quite exciting. The time was exciting. I started to move into television, film. I directed a couple of television sitcom episodes and a kids show, and I made my first short film with my husband, and then I made a couple other web series and stuff, and I started to love the medium. And I also directed in New York, and I did some plays, met some new, again, I felt like one thing that I think it's very important to me that Canada, I think we have to look at is the way that we develop playwrights. Is, I mean, of course, in the States, you have 50 states. So if you have a hit, there's 49 other states and lots of cities that might be giving you another commission. There's many more opportunities for people to, in Canada, you have a hit in Toronto and sometimes people don't ever even get second production. And I just think we need to think more strategize if we really want more international recognition of what we're doing, more support, more people to be able to take a risk on Canadian work because they see the outcomes. We have to support the system of how a play is developed. There's so many people who are developing plays at companies, but I want to see those plays travel. I want to see those plays get second productions. I want to see those writers get commissioned for another production. And so there's things like, I worked with the new play network in the States, and they have rolling world premieres, which is amazing. Because everyone's fighting for the world premiere. So, for example, I did a show called Bars and Measures. It opened on the East Coast. It had 2 runs, went to Seattle, and I did the 4th production in LA. And it had grown so much, and it just got to respond to that and everything else. And by the time we got to LA, we had NAACP nomination, and it was, and then he's gone on to do so many things. And I just feel that often we get 1 or 2 shots. These writers get 1 or 2 shots, and then they're waiting forever. And we're losing some of our writers. We're gonna lose them more and more as Netflix is looking for commissions and to television and film. So just connecting our companies across the country to invest in writers differently. So what I do in 9 years, I worked on shows, and I was a part of that process. And I looked into how writers are being supported differently in the States. And which is like all of those things maybe want to come back to and give back or push or be a part of continuing to put fuel in the fire for our own work here.
Jess in the chat asks, what advice do you give to those that have paused from creating and feel they don't have enough on the resume to professionally develop? And then noted, not asking for a friend, it's me, LOL, sorry.
You have to just keep writing, I think. I don't know, I think, Trey Anthony, just like, when she couldn't get work, she just made it, and that was, and a lot of us, that's what we were doing at the beginning. Thank God for the Fringe, thank God for Summer Works. There's opportunities to for when when you've only sort of been, when you've had a pause, or when there's places to go and get work done. Yeah, I think that's it. You have to just keep keeping on.
Mentorship has played such a huge role, of course, in your life, both being, a mentee and a mentor to many, many people. And I'm so curious, mentorship is something that I feel so passionate about and so grateful for, that I've received in my life. And then I think about, the future and what we pass on to the, we're at a certain age or a certain place, and what it is that we choose to pass on. And this is maybe a very dumb question. This is my question, so that's my dumb, but how can we be good mentors for those people coming up?
I think it's the same thing that institutions have to think about. Yes, we're teaching people, but they are teaching us. Being open to learning from your mentee, I think that is, it's I don't know. People, I think it's just not thinking of this thing as a one way, it's a dialogue. And they are teaching, like, it's the next generation knows things we just don't know, and can't be arrogant about that. Like, so I think that's the thing is, I think the Soulpepper Academy, why I think it's important is because it needs to tell us where we're going, the next cohort. And it has, I mean, as you saw in that picture, the first academy, Mike Ross is now the director of music. I'm artistic director. Lorenzo's resident designer. Jennifer's working in education. Like, it's the way it is the way that you actually create sustainability.
Mhm. Here's a question from Emma. How do you balance grounding yourself in and holding yourself to your morals and values and the community you serve while climbing the ladder of mainstream success in order to have more resources to better serve that community?
Emily?
Emma.
Oh, Emma. Okay, good question. Yeah, that, I'm not going to lie, is always going to be challenging. Not challenging. I mean, I think ultimately the answer is you stay true to who you are, which is why, you know, the moments of meditation, the just reminding yourself what your values are always. Yeah, and I think I have the same best friends from Scarborough when I was 15 now. I have like a circle of group of girlfriends that will always remind me who I am. You know, that helps too. Um, and I think, yeah, there's gonna always be questions when you're moving into new spaces. Of course, we know this is a historically white institution that I'm running now as well, one of the leaders of now. And of course, when I got here, it's how do I create this new relationship with the donors and the board, and you know where there wasn't a Black population in our board, and not really one in our donor community either. So how do I stay true to myself? How do I and talk about what's important to me? And the answer is you just do. You just do. And you invite people into the richness that you're offering. And yeah, and I think through that, then you also invite your community to the table. And yeah, ultimately that's the dream, right? Is that we're all at the table. So, but you have to remain true to yourself, even when it feels uncomfortable or when you question if it's welcomed or anything else. You just have to fight through it.
This is a quote that I pulled that you had said during an interview that I love this. People want authenticity. That's what they want. Yeah, you can try to fit yourself into their mold, but then they want to grow too. And that's been my thing, my fight. Just stay true to myself. Audiences respond when I stay true to myself, not when I compromise.
100%. You know, like practical ways how this has happened for me in my life. Blood Clot is one with Debbie Young. So many times when I was a dramaturg as well as director on that play, and so many times along that process, people told us like, "Can you water it down? We don't understand the Jamaican language. Can you the accent's too thick or whatever it is." And Debbie, of course, you can't tell Debbie nothing, which is why she's so amazing. But both of us were like, "This is the play. This is the language. This is the language." And we were unmoved throughout that. And like the truth was that was the key to that people, why people came in droves. It ultimately won the Dora for Best New Play. So people understood it the same way that people understand Shakespeare. It's like people aren't sitting there with their dictionaries; they're feeling something, right? People want to experience people's authentic experiences, and it's an energy. It's how you convey that story. And so, you know, the lessons like that have continued to remind me, you don't shift yourself. You know, it's like Lorraine Hansberry. I remember when they were saying to her when Raisin in the Sun finally got on Broadway, the first Black play, and they were like, "This is an amazing play. This is not really a Black play. This is like a human story." And she's like, "Yeah, Black people are human." You know, it's like you don't have to change yourself. There's no sort of this idea of like the neutral white existence. It's like, no, we are all, you know, you just bring who you are and your authenticity and your specificity, and that becomes universal.
It's a question from Douglas Peerless. What kinds of stories do you think we will be telling once the pandemic is over? I'm very curious to see what kinds of shows resonate with audiences once we find our new normal.
Yeah, this is why I'm in theater, because I think our new normal is going to continue to shift. I think we're in like phase 2 of it. And that's why theater is so beautiful, is because you can respond to your society and you're like your direct nucleus that you're in. I do think people need many things. I think like right now I'm developing I don't want to give anything away, but yeah, I'm like, wait a minute, how can I answer this? I think there's stories of perseverance and hope and joy, and but also, yeah, I'm looking at stories from different voices, of course, and to be honest, not much of what I was going to program is changing. It's the same. I'm just excited. I wish I could put it on now because it could answer so many things. Or at least these writers are writing about this moment, strangely. So yeah, I don't think what I'm going to program is different. I think it's just that it's going to have a different resonance.
Here's a question from the chat. Do you think we limit BIPOC emerging artists when we place age constraints on those emerging opportunities? What's your definition of an emerging artist?
I mean, yeah. I think there's a danger. Sometimes I can tell you I was emerging for like 20 years, Sometimes there was I definitely found as a Black woman that sometimes my counterparts were being called mid-career when I was still emerging, Black white males. And so there's a trap there. And I think that that's changing. My definition of emerging is literally someone's first show, or when someone's sort of just starting to get their voice heard. It varies, but yeah, I think there are people who are like, sometimes 15 years into my career, I was called emerging, and I had to sort of politely decline that title.
Kara asks, you mentioned you were looking for collaborators before you worked with Trey Anthony. How did you/do you look for those folks? How do you know when you found a good fit for collaboration?
I just I'm a fan of people who are courageous and bold. And yeah, so, that's Janet. And Audrey. And so I literally just followed them around until they would have me. And I met her because she came to Adventures of a Black Girl in Search of God, that production. We talked after. Oh, what am I talking about? No, Trey was in my first play, the one that I did at York Woods Library. I love that we have these references now. Trey came into an audition for me when I did my play, my sci-fi play, Lot 1975, in 1998. And yeah, Trey was one of the actors in there. And then she told me I also write comedy and I do plays and everything else. So I started following, seeing some of the work she's doing, and she's hilarious. She's like, she could also just be a stand-up. She's really funny. And well, she is a stand-up. And then she came to Adventures, and then I met her there, and we did this thing together. So yeah, I guess it's it's a relationship thing again. It's similar philosophies, I suppose, values. And yeah, that's what leads me. And then often if we have a connection there, usually works out well.
This is a very smart question. So everyone, get out your notebook, because we'll all want the answer to this question. What does a play or project need to have for you to want to direct it? And the person asking this identified themselves as R.
Hi, R. Transformation. Somebody's going through it. A society's going through it. I think that's why I go to theater, is to build my courage, just to how people or communities or societies transform or can, grow, deal with pain, yeah, they're, you know, that's that's why I find theater healing. And often I'll find there's like a line in a play that I'll be like, ooh, when the audience hears that, I'm gonna know what hit them. Or you could do this with that, or you could create this image, and it would just bring a moment for people to breathe. I imagine those kind of things. And yeah, but I need that thing. Like in The Kink in My Hair, I'll never forget, there was like a line, and I was a percussionist in the band in that show, so I was there every night. And I remember there's like one line that I would just like sneak up and like wait to hear the audience reaction, because there would always be some kind of a ruffling or a discomfort or something. And to me, it was so important to get it out there. Because it was something that, it was a woman coming out, and the homophobia in our community at that time in 2005, it still hadn't been so publicly stated. And I just like feeling our pushback to that, was a palatable thing to me. And yeah, that's what even me thinking about it now, it gets me excited.
What would you tell someone stepping into a community leadership role in 2020?
A community leadership role?
Mm-hmm.
Take care of yourself. I think we often forget, because we often have most, who are that are drawn to this kind of work are, you just kind of do so much, you want to fix it, you want to give so much, and sometimes you can forget about your own self-care. I really think that we can be more effective if we have a regimen of self-care. And I've definitely forgotten that over the years. And, luckily I have friends like Debbie Young and people who are like, Weyni, what's your self-care? And, yeah. So I really think that's key.
There's a question that came up in the chat. What do you want your legacy to be?
Wow, go easy on me out there. I want, of course, when I switched from the acting program to directing, it was about opening doors. If someone said she opened a door, my job is done. Or someone said she smashed a ceiling, my job is done. I think that's partly also why I came back. Like, to be honest, it's important. Like, I knew I would be the only Black artistic director in the large theaters or Category A theaters in Canada. Like, that should just not be the case. That didn't exist. And I knew that my first year, I would have never imagined looking up and seeing any woman of color running any institutions. And so that alone, and what could come of that, and who we could bring to the table, and how we can bring great artists together. That was it for me.
And what are your dreams for the theater and for the city?
I think those are the same. I think my personal legacy means that actually it affected more than me. It affected the city, it affected the community. That snapshot of our first community gathering, like, that fed me all year. And the second one too, just people feeling like it's their space, dancing and being together, and everybody from the community, so many early artistic directors from the city, like, it was so great to see all of us in a room together, owning the city together. Like, it's like being away for 9 years, you get perspective, and you're like, what actually makes an impact that gets beyond the Canadian border is few and far between. And we can't be sitting so insular in our little, not little, but in our theaters, and not thinking about the larger effects on the country and on the community. We have to work together. We have to, I think, rely on each other and build trust within each other, so that we can actually be ambitious and do things that are going to impact the city.
Well, Weyni, thank you so much for spending this time. We didn't get to all the questions, unfortunately, but I don't know. I feel I just want to thank you for spending this time with us and answering questions, but also, this is a very dramatic, but I can be dramatic. But thank you for coming back, and thank you for your leadership, and for your friendship, and your intelligence, and your talent, and your heart, and thank you for everything. You are such an incredible person. I've always been a huge fan of yours as an artist and as a person. It's been wonderful getting to know you better. Yeah,
Oh.
small words for such an amazing.
Oh my gosh, no. Thank you. Thank you for saying those kind words. Thank you. And thank you all for taking the time to hang out with us and for listening to the story. And thank you to those who've supported Soulpepper in the last year and a half, with all the transition, all the changes. It means a lot that all those community members came to these gatherings that we've been having, that people are watching this, that people are, me being in this role, as I tell my board members, is a form of activism. It is a change, and people, I think the supporting of that change is key, for us to move boldly in this in this moment. So I just want to thank folks who have been supporting.
We're so lucky to have you back in our city.
Thanks.
I have a few things to pass on to those of you who have been watching. I want to thank Akosia and Mimi and Tanya and Malusha and Daniel and Jacob and Brad and Michael for helping to put this together. Once again, I'd like to thank you for joining us. And that's it. Thanks for everyone for viewing and for viewing. What a nerdy thing to say. Thank you for viewing. Thanks for being here. Okay, bye.